Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. That may have been the worst thing I've seen this year. By the time we're doing this, it was 46-9, and we just decided to do this a few minutes early. So the final score wasn't quite finished. I'm sure Detroit added more to it. John Middlekauff, former NFL scout for the Eagles, 3 and Out podcast for the Volume. I mean, there's a million things. I had said Friday on FS1, the slow oil leak would begin this week with a schedule. Too many good quarterbacks. God, you could tell early. 7-3, Cowboys bad tackling, Dak an end zone pick.
Jeez.
You know, it's my take on Dallas is this roster is, if you're going to pay Dak that kind of money, you have to hit, not just, you have to, third round, fourth round, fifth round picks have to become stars. You have to find a couple Puka Nakuas in the fifth. John, this Cowboy roster is just not very good, is it?
Well, with the injuries they have, they would not beat any good team in the NFC. They would get boat raced when you think about all the good teams in the NFC, all have excellent offenses, right? Detroit, clearly one of the best. They could score 40 on them with their eyes closed. The 49ers, the Packers, the way Washington's playing right now, the Vikings, Caleb, right? The way that offense is humming. So the defense with their injuries stands no chance. If they are going to win, how often do you win a game in which they did last week, which I gave them credit because it was a gritty performance on the road, must win. When the quarterback throws 2 interceptions, he has another fumble, and you get a blocked field goal. It never happens. It shows you how inept last week Fields and that offense was. When he threw the pick today, I said last week, is he one of the more bizarre players? Because obviously he's good and has awesome moments, but then he consistently lets you down in the playoffs. But he's played very well in some huge regular season games that are being watched by 30 plus million. He plays for the Cowboys. But God, he throws a lot of picks. That end zone pick then turns into a field goal. So that's a 6-point swing, and then the route's on. And they had if they were going to win today, it was going to have to be like 35-30. And he just kind of imploded and looked like a different guy. And so did their offensive line and all their offensive weapons. Kind of tapped out after about 5 minutes into the second quarter.
I've said, for years, I've compared him to Kirk Cousins with more mobility, but I think Kirk showing it again in Atlanta. Kirk's a better thrower of the football. Kirk doesn't make a ton of mistakes. And frankly,
more accurate.
Just a more accurate thrower of the football. If you asked, right now I get Kirk Cousins. He's got about half of Dak's contract, and he's a better thrower of the football. And so we always love all these mobile quarterbacks, but the truth is, with Aaron Rodgers and Dak right now, they're not very mobile. Hell, I watched Baker Mayfield and Bo Nix today. Bo Nix is fast. You don't have to love him, but Jesus, the kid, Brock Purdy moves really well. So I think Mike McCarthy is paying the price for Jerry Jones' ego. An 81-year-old guy who wants to be the general manager, call press conferences. And I've said this before. I just don't know how good of a job this is. You walk into a job. Let's be honest. There's 2 great jobs to take in this league. You got a star quarterback, and you're going to have to pay him. Or you have a talented rookie quarterback like Caleb or Jaden Daniels on a rookie contract. So now I got to play around with some chess pieces. I can go buy a pass rusher. What you don't want to have is an average guy that you're overpaying. And Kirk Cousins' deal right now is a very solid deal. It's not egregious. They didn't have to get rid of anybody. The Dak deal, which hasn't even started the new one yet, I think this is going to be a downhill trajectory for years, to me.
I do think Jerry's drafted relatively well, though. They've won 12 games 3 straight years, but they kind of hit the point this year where they lost a bunch of guys in free agency, and they were going to have to double down, obviously, on Dak, and then Micah hadn't even been paid, and they paid CD, so now the team becomes an NBA squad.
But let's be honest, though. The last 2 years, Aaron Rodgers leaves the NFC. A lot of these Jordan Loves, a lot of the, Chicago didn't have Caleb. Washington was a mess. San Francisco was great. Detroit was good. Now they're exceptional. The last 2 years, the NFC's had a pretty weak middle and bottom. Well,
True,
that's
so
over.
Beat up. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Green Bay, Detroit. So there was this window, and we're like, oh, they won 12 games. That's a 9-win team in the AFC.
That's fair because they weren't. Then they'd get into the dance and they would get beat at home by the Niners. They would get rolled at home by the Packers. They would go on the
Yes.
road and get beat by the Niners. So it's like, well, they got their chances with an inflated. Yeah, that is fair
Yeah.
because the division was, listen. They always play Philly tight, right? They're probably going to split those games most years, and they got to beat up on Washington in the Giants. And clearly, Washington today to me was actually a big winner. I was like, damn, they might be a little better than I thought.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm more impressed with them in a loss than I have with some of
Yeah.
their. But that's a problem for the Cowboys and the Eagles because I'm watching the Eagles today and Sirianni screaming at fans. It's like, hey, Nick, calm down, buddy. I mean, you're barely beating the Browns as like a 10-point favorite at home. Your fans aren't happy with you, and they have a point. And the Cowboys, this was obviously a bad matchup for them given their injuries, but they're just getting their butt kicked at home. And Dak talked about it this week. He's like, listen, we got to start. We got to take care of business at home. It ain't even close. It ain't even close. So
Listen to this. Go back to last year. Packers, Saints, Ravens, Lions have humiliated them at home. Now, those are good teams. That's near the top of the league.
Well, that's to your argument. Then they're 12 wins, a little inflated. And then when you get them against the big boys,
they get
subtract the Eagles, who they're comfortable playing. They're getting work. Look at the Niners game last year. I mean, what was the final score of that? Like 45-10. They got destroyed.
I think you have to really. This will sound crazy. I would considering. Listen, you're going to pay. They've already paid Dak and CD. Would you consider to get draft capital? You get a first round pick for Micah.
You'd get more than that. Yeah, 100%. I've had people ask me, Cowboy fans, should we just do this? What's the point? Our defense isn't even close. Why wouldn't we just start over?
And Hutchison's injury today is heartbreaking for Detroit. But before that injury, he's not Myles Garrett. He's not Hutchison. He's not Nick Bosa. He's not. He's not as big, as strong. He can be overwhelmed by like a Trent Williams. He can disappear in big spots with top tackles. I think Micah, a lot of teams would use an edge rusher. I think you have to think about moving off it, getting a first and a third, and just going into because what Dallas has to find now, John, they got to find cheap, good players. So I do want to say this about Detroit. Tom Brady made a point today, and I thought it was a really good one. He said, Detroit has something that is really special. They can play power football. They can play efficient football with that offensive line. They can play keep away, just grind you out. Or they can throw the ball, but they can also get clever with Ben Johnson. It's a really fun offense for players. It's very rare, John. Usually you have to pick your spots, and they don't have a mobile quarterback. But shit, they can road grade you. They can go over the top with Williams. They do trick plays with Ben Johnson. Hutchison's injury is just devastating and gutting. But I got to tell you, there's not a lot of offenses in the league that can beat you like 6 ways. I thought it was a good point. Dallas today had no answers and plus injuries, but they did 7, 8 different ways to beat you.
Well, with McCaffrey out, it's the most complete offense in the league. And one thing they even had over the 49ers last year is their offensive line is just better. I mean, Brady mentioned it. Penei Sewell's the best right tackle in the NFL. Yeah. Now that, Lane's an aging player. The thing that hit me when he's laying on the ground, and I would imagine beating a team 700-0 in the locker room, it's not going to be as joyous as sometimes they can be with Dan Campbell. It's going to be a weird vibe for them. I think the team and their general manager comes from the Rams, Brad Quinn, is that his name? And he's seen
Brad Holmes, I think.
Brad Quinn, Brad Holmes. And he saw Les and Sean and that operation get really aggressive over the years. And he was part of an aggressive trade when they did the Matt Stafford, Jared Goff trade. Don't you call the Raiders? I mean, that thing is that's a tire fire burning even stronger by the week. And just say, hey, listen, we'll give you 2 ones for Max Crosby.
Yeah.
Seriously. Max Crosby played his college football at a smaller school in Michigan.
Yeah.
The Raiders are going nowhere with him. Obviously, Devontae separate, but hey, because you can't. You have games like today before he's laying there on the ground, and some of their players are in tears. I mean, Jared Goff looked like he was crying because Jared's no dummy. Like he's been to a Super Bowl. He got close last year. He knows that's their best player on their team at the most important non-quarterback position in the NFL, laying there with We obviously didn't see the replay. What I would imagine, and there might have been a bone sticking out of his leg, right? It took a long time for them to get him in the car.
Well, Fox wouldn't show it.
Yeah, so if you told me it was a compound fracture, that's kind of what I expected. To me, Max Crosby honestly kind of fits their ethos and their culture. Like if I'm the Lions, Max Crosby makes more sense than giving the farm for Micah Parsons, who's a little bit more of a one-trick pony. Would you offer 2-1s for Max Crosby? I obviously there are financials, situations there, but I think I would go all in on this because if you're Detroit, you're thinking if our defense 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago against Geno was like, what the hell's this? You can't win a Super Bowl when you can't cover. But if you subtract that game, they've been actually pretty good on defense. Like they look like a different team today. But you're not winning a Super Bowl, I don't think, with him gone for the year with no replacement. And to me, Max Crosby would be worth it to quote unquote overspend a little bit to get him.
Yeah, and also, the Raiders would do it because they want multiple ones because they want to be able to have chess pieces to move up the board if they're like fourth or fifth. I mean, they're going to get a quarterback. That's obvious. No, I think that's a great. I think there's a couple of things that are going to happen at the trade deadline. So the Cowboys are humiliated. Max Crosby to the Lions, I think, is a kind of a sharp suggestion.